Traditional real estate school.
The traditional, yes, to get my real estate license, okay? And so, but I didn't have enough money, right? Like, I went on the payment plan. I think it was like $250 or $245. So at the last day, I did not have the $45, so that did not allow me to take the test at all. So I was
wow.
Yeah, exactly. So I couldn't do it. So I went back 2 years later. I think I was like 20 at the time, like right before I was 21. This time I had saved the money, paid them up front. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm like, here's your money. Took the class. I did, did very well, studied, passed the I like to brag about passing the test on the first time.
Good for you.
Because, a lot of people don't break.
A lot of people
so,
don't.
Yeah. So, passed it. So now, as when I got my license, I went to work for this real estate company, and they had good trainings and everything, right? But I had a friend who was doing mortgages, okay? So, and he used to tell me, Sandy, it's better on this side. You come work for this company. We make more money than the commissions you're making. I mean, he bugged me so much that I was like, fine.
What year was this?
This was 2002. So I got my license. Yeah, I got my license in June of 2002. And then so fast forward to December 2002. And he had been bugging me like the entire time to like, come do mortgages, right? So then I went to work for their offices. And I mean, at first, like really, like it took me a while to get it, okay? Like literally it took me a while to get it. Like, like I remember, all the account executive, like they would come with their loan products. And, you have to have a certain credit score to qualify, depending on whatever the loan is. And then, we'd go by the middle score, right? For the longest time, like I literally thought the middle score was the score in the middle. But I ended up doing really good because I'm a hard worker, right? So I would stay like all day just calling like different lenders and seeing who have pretty much good products, and also to basically there were a lot of lenders, capital investors at like, let's say 10 properties, right? So I used to stay all night just calling lenders, figuring out who can do what, who can do basically the hard loans. Like I found lenders that would do unlimited properties.
Were you wholesaling?
No, I
loans?
hadn't started wholesaling. I was just a loan officer.
But you were a loan officer calling banks? Usually I thought that was like a wholesaler within the mortgages that would do that.
Yeah, so I would be doing the loans, but now what I'll do is I'll call, basically they all have basically account executive, right? People that work for them. They go to the different mortgage offices to sell their loan products. So the loan officers can basically, if you have choices of, let's say, 5 different lenders that offer, basically, that can finance your person, right? At the end of the day, they want to get the business. Right. You know what I mean? So I would basically call them to see who's offering the best, with basically the minimal requirement to do certain type of loans, right? In the best rate, down payments, just getting all of their criterias basically. So now I know this bank, this lender can do this type of loan. They're only requiring 10% down, or they're requiring 5% down, and then you only need to have basically this amount of credit score. So basically I would just be gathering all the information, as much information as possible. So now whenever, I was either helping out a client or looking for something for myself, I know, this lender can do this lender can go over this. And what happened was I ended up finding a good amount of lenders that would do like maybe a lower credit score, you know what I mean? Or that would do maybe like 3% down, or allow the seller to hold like a second, where these other lenders wouldn't do that. You know what I mean? So basically, I would just basically gather as much information as possible from as many different lenders as possible. So now I know who can do what. Yeah. You know what I mean? And what happened in that process is I got pretty good at finding out the ones that would do basically the creative stuff that other lenders wouldn't do. And what happened with that is then people started bringing me all their hard to do deals. You know what I mean? So because I know who could do them. So everybody would be bringing me all their hard to do deals. But in the process of that, I was like, okay, one of the hardest thing for people, especially because I wasn't even thinking wholesaling at the time, right? I was thinking investing, but not wholesaling, right? So what happened was doing that, I was like, well, one of the hardest thing to do is finding the money. So now I kind of like figured out how to find the money. And at the same time, I'm going through to investors meetings, right? So I'm going to investors meeting, basically just learning as much as I can, as much as I can. Yes, like the RIAs, right? And then at the investor meeting, I ended up meeting this one guy, and he was an investor. He was a handyman. Like, he would be, rehabbing the houses. So he had 10 properties to sell, right? So I bought 10 properties from him.
Oh, you went to RIA and you bought?
Yes, I bought. I met. Yes, I network, meeting people. So I bought 10 properties, no money down, because I was able to get the 80%, and he could finance the rest of it, right? Yeah. Exactly, right? Exactly. And I ended up using different family members and things like that, because I was really young. You know what I mean? And my credit sucked at the time. However, but partnering and using family members, I got the first 10, and he introduced me to other investors, bought 10 more. I'm just like the going all in type, and I'm gonna swim to figure it out. I don't really know how to swim in real life though, but I'm just gonna figure it out.
Of course.
So the mortgage in that sense kind of helped me, right? Because now once I met him, I could put a deal together. So that's how I basically literally got started. I used those properties as Section 8 rentals at the time, and the rates were they were stupid low. And you're talking about like 2003 at this time, 2003, 2004. My payments would be like $400. You know what I mean? And then I can get 900 to 1200 Section 8. So it was like basically pretty good income,
sure.
Right? Yeah. So, and at the same time, as I was doing that, I was also rehabbing. I started rehabbing. Hey, why not, right? Why not? So, and Joey, and his name is Joey, right? Joey actually was really helpful, because he taught me a lot about that. And he used to basically rehab the properties for me, and then if we had to hire contractors, we would hire the contractors. But he took me through all that process, and I learned a lot. You know what I mean? I learned a lot. So that's literally how my real estate career, got started.
So, but as you learn about the real estate investment side, you continue doing the mortgages?
Yes. Yes, I continued doing the mortgages, I think, for about, it was like somewhere between 5 to 7 years, so maybe to like 2007-ish.
So until the crash.
Yes. Yeah, so I continued doing, because I enjoy doing mortgages. I like the challenge. You know what I mean? So that's like, and I literally, I still have my real estate license. I keep it active, but I don't like doing the realtor thing.
Oh, of course not.
I don't have the patience for it. You know what I mean? I just don't have, I have some friends that are very good at, they're like great realtors, but it's not my thing. You know what I mean?
The fact you were out here for a week, right? It's kind of hard to do those things. Yeah. You're actively working with clients. Okay, so so you did this up until the crash. Anything? Like, what changed then after that? So the crash was basically where you pivoted?
Well, so what happened was, during that time, I wholesale like one deal, but it was not because I was trying to be a wholesaler. It just happened to be the circumstance, right? Right. So what happened was, so now I had made tons of money, right? I made a lot of money, and I had all these properties. And so I used to go to those Dave Lindahl, apartment complex, seminars and things like that. And my goal was, okay, you want to get rid of all these single family properties and get into an apartment complex. So I started selling everything I had before the crash.
Well, that was fortunate.
That was, right? Yeah. So, some of my friends was like, well, how did you know? I didn't know anything. I just started, I started selling them off. I, had accumulated all of this cash, and I was going to use that to get the apartment complex. But in the process of that, right, there's a longer due diligence process. So a friend of mine, and he happened to be a hard money lender, right? So he was like, okay, why don't you let me use some of that money to lend out? You'll get your return. I know, right? So the mistakes in that came after I had literally sold. I lost about 5 properties, but the majority of them I had already sold. Okay, so now I'm lending money here, money there. So all the cash I had, basically, I lend them out. But here's the kicker, right? So I did not get anything as collateral to protect myself. So at the end of the day, market crash, all of these people now who had all the cash that I had, lent them, I'm like, okay, so now where's my money? A bank, you borrow money from a bank, they're going to take your house. Where's my collateral? What am I going to take back? There is nothing. But the thing about that is, it was a huge lesson for me because I had not taken the chance, and I was just trusting, people to do right by me. Now, I don't think they meant any harm, but they say the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? Mm-hmm. So now I did not take the time to make sure I had the paperwork drawn out to make sure that they actually, signed documents that would basically protect me, protect my money. So I didn't do any of that. So what happened was I ended up losing it all anyways.
How much did you lose doing that?
Over $800,000 cash money. Yeah. Yeah, so it was a bummer because on several on several different levels, my plan was, to help my mom. You know what I mean? And I come from a very poor family, and I don't like to talk about, it's not that I don't mind talking about it, but, I don't want to mess up my makeup with tears coming out. So hopefully, tears come out, right? But I had planned on paying off my mom's house, and I was like, you know what? Let me just go ahead and do this investment, then I'll do that.
Let it ride.
Right, exactly. So, none of that happened, and, I was really depressed. I got really depressed for a while.
Of course.
Yeah, but, sometimes I think, well, at least at that time, I thought I was a little toughy, you know what I mean? Yeah. But then, it really broke me down to my core, you know what I mean? I was like, man, I'd been working hard. And what hurt me the most was that, the plan that I had to help my people and, that didn't happen. And then I remember one day, I called my mom. And I was like, I'm depressed, and this is the stuff. Okay. Anyway, so I called my mom. I was like, I'm depressed, so she got everybody, the entire family, on the phone, and they just started praying. And that broke me because I was like, man, you know what I mean? It's like my family, and I felt like I had let them down. But they were like, you know what, Cindy, it's just money, it's just stuff. You did it before, you can do it again. They were doing all the encouraging stuff.
Right.
Okay, so my makeup messed up.
Your makeup's good. Right. Sam, you might want to bring some Kleenex in here.
Yeah. But that always bring tears to my eyes because that was my people, we come from struggle. We're from Haiti, you know what I mean? And my parents, they came here before I did. They left me and my sister, behind with my aunt, and they were here for 3 years before they could even send back for us, right? And so they came here on a visa in the 80s, and they worked in the cornfield, the sugarcane field, and they were, they're packing boxes of corns for 10 cents a box. You know what I mean? And a full day of work is $16, $20. You know what I mean? Working hours and hours, and a full day really is basically a 16-hour day. You know what I mean? Way above and beyond. So it's they work so hard, and then, when they, I don't even know how they did it, but they got money to bring me and my sister here. There was this whole organization where basically you take on somebody else's identity, right? They find somebody in America who's legal here, who has either a green card or was born here, and they kind of pair you with that person. You have to somewhat look like them, right? Because you got to get through the whole embassy situation, and then they bring you to this house, and you should see it's a bunch of kids on the dirt floor, right? And you have to stay there until you have learned everything about that person. You got to learn their name, you got to learn their background, what school they go to. Basically, it's you're learning an entire, other identity, so that when you get to that embassy, you do not mess up, because if you do, somebody's getting arrested, right? Now, I didn't know all of this because I was just a kid. I was I was 9. I didn't know, but eventually I put it all together, right? So, but yeah, so me and my sister, and I just, I just found out, my mom just told me this Thanksgiving, I wasn't even supposed to be here. That was by accident, okay? So the plan was, it was my sister because she's older. So, you know, it's in the Haitian community, it's like the older one, you know what, they're going to be in charge. You're going to get them here first and then, you know.
Figure out the rest.
Right, figure out the rest. So the plan apparently was, it's my sister that was supposed to be here, but I ended up, now my sister and I, we got split into 2 different houses. I think it's because the other people had somebody that looked like her, and so we got split up at the time where my uncle dropped us off. So I ended up coming, I think about 2 to 3 weeks it took for me to get here in the country. But when I got here, it was like June of 1990, right? So when I got here, my mom, she's a migrant worker, so she was away, like they go away for like a month or 2 months, you know, just doing migrant work. So, and you know, this is before like the cell phones were, right. Yeah, so somebody told her, and she literally just told me this Thanksgiving, somebody told her that, oh, your daughter's here. And then she was like, oh, great. She's thinking it's my sister, right? And then she said she said, I come in, it's you. I'm like, well, damn. Yeah. But because she only had money for one of us, right? She had been raising the money. She had money for one of us. So I'm there and my sister's still in at the other house. So she's like, well, what am I going to do now? Mm-hmm. Because that was not the plan. The plan was to get the oldest one here first, and then we go back for you, right? So, I mean, it's just literally by miracles after miracles that I'm even here. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because that wasn't even the plan.
So your parents or your mom, mm-hmm. your family prayed for you, mm-hmm. and kind of got you out of your funk.
Well, that didn't really get me out of the funk. Like, initially, it made me feel even worse. Oh. Because it was like, I mean, it's like I appreciate it, right? It was great. It's just what made me feel bad about that is because I feel like, man, you know, I felt like a disappointment. You know what I mean? But they're like, oh, no. You know what I mean? I felt like I felt like I let them down. So, you know, it was almost like the fact that they could be so gracious and kind. It made me feel even worse. It was almost like, man, just tell me off, really. You know what I mean? Like, because sometimes that motivates me to just, okay, yeah, I'll show you. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, but yeah.
So how did you turn things around?
So basically, you know, after a good while, maybe it was 6 to 9 months. I don't even think 9 months. It was just like, okay, you know, you have to do something. You know what I mean? You have to do something. You can't just allow yourself to remain in this funk. Like, that's not you. Like, I gave myself so many pep talks, right? It was a lot of pep talks, listening to motivational stuff, a lot of prayer, you know, lots and lots of prayer. And, you know, it just got to the point, I was like, you know, what you doing? You know what I mean? What you doing? This not you, you know what I mean? Like, you gotta, like, shake it off. You gotta do what you gotta do. Get out there, do what you know how to do, you know, best. Like, get yourself together. You know what I'm saying? Like this isn't you, you know? And then, and, you know, and I had some really good friends too, like, you know, and they knew the situations, and, you know, they known me from before, you know, it's important to have some good people in your life. I had some good friends, like, encouraging me, you know what I mean? It's like,
well, and I think this is important because a lot of us, you know, like, it seems, a lot of this business seems great, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of it seems great. But there are days where it's really awful.
Oh, yeah, and for sure.
Having the right support and right people around you.
Yeah, it's very important. Okay,
so then, what was the first step? I mean, did you just, from there, did you jump into wholesaling? When did that transpire?
All right, so what I did, you know, I was like, okay, all right, get yourself together. Mm-hmm. All right, get yourself together, sister, and, you know, get out there. So I got in the car, you know, I started driving around, and then there was a for sale sign. All right. So, you know, I pulled over, I called them, and then, of course, one of the things I always do is I ask them, your property's still available? I said, do you have anything else for sale? And he said, I have 4. I said, hallelujah. Like, I did. You know what I mean? I said, hallelujah. So I, you know, put that property on the contract, and within a couple of weeks, sold them, made $20,000. All of the properties. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I went knocking on some doors that I already knew. Like, by doors, I mean
$20K total.
Total, yes. Okay. $20K total for 4. Okay. Yeah. So then I went to, you know, I still knew some of the investors, you know, there's always mine. So I went to one that was right down the street. Now, I was in St. Pete at this time, by the way, because I had ended up losing my personal home. I ended up losing my personal home. So I ended up having to move to this hood apartment, right? And I grew up in the hood, don't get me wrong, but I wasn't trying to go back, okay? So I ended up in St. Pete in this 2-story, it was like an upstairs apartment. I mean, it was a mess. But anyways, in the hood, and I'll tell you how hood it is. When I ended up moving out, I had to move out because I went home for Thanksgiving, came back, somebody had broke in. Yeah, so that if that tells you where I was, right? So basically, anyways, back to the story. So I knew an investor that was basically right down the street. I was like, here, you're coming with me. I literally dragged them, and I don't like to drive, right? So I was like, come on, you're driving. I took him to the property. You know, he bought one, then his brother bought the other one, and then the other two, one was a Bennett sign and one was Craigslist. You know, so yeah.
When was this?
So this was 2000 in, I think this was maybe 2010-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that was a really interesting time. There was a lot less competition. But buyers were harder to come by as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like now you got a deal,
Yeah.
But back then, it's like you had to have a really good deal. So
yeah, and they were good deals. But what I did, so when I took that money and then I started, because now everybody's doing the online auctions and things like that. But I started focusing on getting deals from the online auctions, and I used the money for the earnest money deposits. You know what I mean? Because they want their deposit. You know what I mean? So then I just started building back up like that. You know what I mean? I would just be on the auction site just all day. I'm like watching it, right?
So was it the same RIA group that you were at before that helped you? Like, was it those connections? Like, how did you go from, you basically transition industries, right? Went from being a loan officer, creative loan officer, but a loan officer, to just wholesaling. I mean, like, was it those connections you created at the RIAs that helped you, or like, how did you bounce back?
Yeah, so like, for example, that one investor actually was kind of like, there are certain people in the network, I guess. So like Joey, like the investor, I said I literally went and got, he's saying like, you coming with me? Like Joey also does rehabs for him. So it was like a group. There's this group of investors, a lot of them from the RIA connection, and others from people just meeting through the group, to the circle, basically.
And so at this time, you were mostly finding properties through auction?
Yeah, so after I did those 4 deals, getting back on my feet and everything, right? So I just literally, was it Hubzu? I think it was Hubzu, right?
Hubzu was one of the big ones.
Yeah. So anyways, I would just sit there and just bid on properties. I'm bidding. I bid all day, all night. I'm just bidding and bidding and bidding. And then I would just, until I get it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I hated Hubzu.
Yeah, why?
It was just always difficult to use, and as an REO agent, right, you get these offers like, that's a lowball offer. It's like, got it. And so you, as an investor, you're bidding, and it's fun, right? Yeah. Me as an agent at that time, I would have to go and look at those offers and take them and type them in to the. I was like, here's an offer for $50,000. I know we're listed at $90,000. Here's an offer for $50,000. I have to do that all day.
That's annoying.
It was very irritating on the agent side for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, so you basically rebuilt using bidding on auction sites.
Yeah, bidding on auction sites, and then I started getting referrals again. One of the things is like, because I guess there's this thing about me that attracts the hard deals sometimes, right? So like people, they will bring me the deals that they cannot get done, and I'll get them done, which is the problem because they keep bringing me the hard stuff that they can't do.
Oh, you're supposed to get paid more on those. Are you getting paid more on those?
Well, see, here's the thing. It's the numbers still have to work. It still have to make sense. So if they're like bringing me the deal, we're typically splitting it. You know what I mean? I am good at maximizing it though.
But it should be a larger spread if it's harder. It's not. You're telling me that's not the case.
Well, it's not always the case. It still has to make sense, but it's not always the case. Yeah. And the thing with me is, I don't know if I'm like obsessive like that or obsessed like that. It's just like once I touch the deal and I feel like I can do it, I'm not gonna let it go until I do it. So then it doesn't actually always become about the money. It's just I got to get this done.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, and that's a good quality. Yeah. I'm just asking because I got another, one of my mentors, Dave Day. He only does deals that were like he's wholesaling for like 6 figures.
Yeah.
So, but he does deals that no one else can do.
Yeah.
Okay, so then that was, in 2010. Like, what were some of the other significant events as far as building your business? Because there's a lot of, like, you don't just get here, right? Like, what were some other major events?
I mean, there was still some ups and downs. First, just on both personal and business. And then I went through this struggle too. When I first got in there, it was like, man, do I still want to be in this business? You know what I mean? I went through the mental challenge of trying to figure out, okay, it's like there was this thing about people say, well, you're good at it, you can do it, but I'm like, yeah, but I don't know if I want to do this anymore. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then it was just like, it had to come a time where, okay, I had to kind of like refocus my mind in what this means for me. So I literally, just a few years ago, I was like, I don't just want this to be just about the money anymore. Money is the money. Okay. So it's like, I want it to mean something more. So I literally started praying about, what? I want this to have more meaning, to mean something. I don't just want to get up just for another check or for another deal. So, so one of the things I started to do was just like, out of every deal, I give away 10%, whether it's like through family members who need it, like just making it like doing this. There's a reason, there's a purpose for me to do this. It's not just a selfish reason. And once I started doing that, just like refocusing, reframing the reason why I'm doing this, then it started to become more fulfilling for me. You know what I mean? So just a lot of changes occurring with that. And also too, then once I figured out, okay, you know what, now there's a purpose behind this, now let's organize this, in a way that makes sense, that you can grow it. And and I'm like so excited now because I'm like one of these people that's like scattered brain, you know what I mean? So I have learned that I gotta stay focused, I get ideas and things. So I learned that I have to focus, and especially now too, wanting to grow everything and bring Gary in. Oh my gosh! So they have,
You brought Gary in?
Yes, yeah. I need just this a couple of months ago, like September was the first meeting.
Not that long ago.
Yeah, September was like the first meeting, and we just had our 2 days. I think it was like around Thanksgiving, right?
Yeah,
I think it was around Thanksgiving. But
he just came out for us. It was very humbling.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's a good thing.
Yeah, it is. It's a great thing. I'm really excited, man, because just bringing some clarity, because that's not my strength. Like those stuff are not my strength.
So let's talk about before we talk about COVID, like. Mobile homes. When did you transition into mobile homes? So
a couple of years ago. So here's the thing, like we used to do all the other property types, right? Now I was in Tampa initially, okay? So I was in Tampa for like basically 20 years outside of the window that I had moved to St. Pete, but same area, same difference, right? So, and Tampa is one of those areas that's like saturated, right? Yes, there's still deals, but I don't want to be fighting 20, 30 people for the same deal.
Tampa is, before Phoenix became the guru capital of the world, it was Tampa.
Yeah.
I think we took it from them.
You did? Yeah, I believe you now. Yeah, because I can't think of as many people,
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, so it was tough to compete in Tampa.
Well, yeah, so, yeah, because now I would do like the marketing pieces and stuff like that, but then, we got to fight so many people for the same deal. And then I'm just always thinking of ways of, okay, so how do we do things differently, right? And initially I, there was a time where I was marketing straight towards like condos, like, because condos for investors, unless it's a hell of a deal, they're not messing with it, because then a lot of them, they want that association fee that's just eating out of their profit. So but unless it's just a great deal that makes sense, they're staying away. So for a while I was just doing condos, 55 plus and all, you know what I mean? So like seriously,
very
like
niche.
Yes,
very niche.
Yeah, it is. So but there are some frustrations with that too, dealing with the HOAs, and then you have to break it down, like, oh my gosh. But
and longer closes because of the HOA.
Right. So you know what? So then a couple of years ago, and we used to get mobile home leads all the time, but I was in the mindset of who wants to do a mobile home. You know what I mean? Like, because here's the thing too, especially like some of these investors, a lot of them want block home. They, there's a few that I have found from being in St. Pete that, are more open to frame homes, but there are still a lot of them don't even want to touch a frame home. So now I'm thinking, people don't even want to touch a frame home. What are they going to do with a mobile home? Yeah. So I used to just basically just ignore those leads. And then, you too?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so one day I was, we got a lead and I was like, you know what? Let's give it a try. Let's give it a try. And we did, and we made $10,000. And I was like, what? We're leaving some money on the table. So immediately I did a mailer that was all mobile homes. All mobile homes, and we got a bunch of deals from it. And I was like, okay, that's what we're gonna do. And that's literally how that got started. It is not because that I was some mobile home expert and know anything about a mobile home. It was literally like, let's give this a try. And then after I did the mailer, man, like we would get people that call us. They said, man, we never got an offer from anyone to buy our property. I was like, you don't say.
No competition.
Yeah, exactly.
I can say like our largest fees are multifamily properties, but then right behind that is mobile homes.
Yes.
Like, manufactured homes is way better than single family as far as assignment fees go.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Like way better.
Okay, so you decided to go there. When did you decide to go do it virtually?
So, well, I was already working virtually at the time anyways, right? Now, it wasn't always virtual because when I first started in the business, I was, used to like going to see the property, checking everything out, bringing my contractor out, you know what I mean? And then, I say, the house got to talk to me. I got to feel the energy, you know what I mean? If it ain't talking to me, we ain't got nothing going on here. Yeah. But anyway, so I was in that mindset, right? And then years later, my husband and then some other friends, I was like, yo, you don't really need to be going to all of these properties all the time. Like, you're really wasting your time. I was like, no, I don't think so. But eventually, I was like, okay, you know what? I need to be open-minded to that, right? And then so we started doing everything virtually from there. And I was like, okay, this works. This works. So and that was way before, we got into the mobile home space.
Okay, so you went virtually and then you started doing mobile homes. At which point was it a national thing? When did you say, because you were doing Florida.
Yeah, we were doing Florida because I had initially I started just, basically I was in Tampa, right? So initially it was just like Hillsborough County, Pinellas, Polk, the surrounding areas, right? So when we started doing mobile homes, we had only been doing stuff in the surrounding areas, but now it's like, okay, there's only so many mobile homes. You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, we got to spread our wings, okay? So then I started just marketing through by counties through the entire state, and then basically seeing which one works better for us. You know what I mean? So yeah, so we just started like with the entire state of Florida, and then now, because remember, it's only been a couple of years doing the mobile homes, right? So now this year we've added on some more states because we got more people that can handle more leads now. So we have Arizona, we've closed some already here and got some more in the contract. We've done Texas, North Carolina, and we're adding on more.
Right.
But, yeah, and then and I'm finding out, man, like every state got their own challenges, their own thing. Like it's funny because like we're learning so much as we go because every area got their own little thing. Yeah. I didn't even know, like I know it's the desert and all here, right? I didn't know that there are some properties that have no well, they get water delivered every month.
Really?
You didn't know that either?
I didn't know that.
Oh my God! So we got to do it right now. Okay, we got to do it right now. And so we had a buyer go out, right? And the buyer was like, "There is no well." We called the county.
There's no well, and there's no there's no well and there's no sewer. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no. It has septic, but it doesn't have well, right? Yeah. It's like there's no well, no, like it's not city water or anything. Like literally, there's no water. Okay, like none. All right. So and then the buyer's like, yeah, there's nothing. Then this other buyer say, yeah, I live on that street. Yeah, we get water delivered. I'm like, what? And so Heather, she works with me, right? She's like my right hand, helps me with everything. So I'm like, Heather, can you call the county and kind of like verify this thing, right? And she did, and she's like, yeah, there's no well. So then and I'm like, okay, call the owner. How is that possible? Like, how did they do it? Then so she goes, yeah, like they have this, I guess there's this service where they just haul water. But I'm like, how do they get all that to work? That I'm still trying to figure out. But somehow they get it, and that's how they run everything.
So obviously each area has their own different challenges.
Yeah.
What about, so you expanded nationally. That was before the COVID crisis. Well,
we started... Yeah, no, not before. Like right after COVID.
So COVID started, and then you decided to go nationwide.
Yeah, I know, right? Pivot. Yeah, what did I tell you? Then I said I'd like to jump in and just like figure it out. But yeah.
Okay, so because one of the things to talk about is like, man, you sold side me during this whole pandemic from scratch.
Yeah.
So how was that journey?
Well, I mean, it wasn't. I wouldn't say it was hard or anything like that or difficult. It was just, just basically doing what we do. You know what I mean? Just working at it, working the leads, just doing what we do. Now, when the COVID did start, I did not know initially how it was going to affect us. I didn't know.
Yeah, we didn't know.
Yeah. So, because there's a percentage of the properties we sell that's vacant, and then there's a percentage too that's occupied. I was more concerned about the occupied ones,
right?
Because it's like if we can't show it, it's hard to sell. You know what I mean? But we eventually, found some people that would kind of work with us. Like, they'll, leave the house and then let like one person walk in at a time. Like we just had to restructure some things around. So it turned out a lot better than I had, expected, because I expected the worst, because nobody knew what the heck was going to happen with this thing, right? So
you're direct mailing everybody. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Who are you mailing?
So I'm mailing absentee owners. I'm mailing owner occupants. Now I typically start off every area though first with absentee, because they want to increase my chances. Now I do get some motivated seller lists from Eric. I don't know if you know Eric Torrente. Like he sells like the inherited list, divorce list, all that. It's like anyway, so I do mail to those. However, too, again, there's only so many of them, right? So you're not going to get a huge list once you start breaking it down like that.
Well, once you're consistent, it's hard.
Yeah, but so like absentee owners, I do a lot. Sometimes I do, I'll do any age. However, a lot of elderly, like from 60 and over, or even 50 and over sometimes, because a lot of these mobile homes, right, especially like in Florida, they're second homes. Some of them, they're like the vacation homes, or second homes. And even some are just, even if it's like a rental property for the people. Now, what we have found is, especially like with the older people who have all these mobile homes, sometimes they don't visit them for years. They're just like, look, we're just tired. We don't even go there anymore.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Like seriously, and some of them they leave the property there just rotting away. Like I don't even know what it looks like anymore. Like seriously.
So you're direct mailing. Now, how are you finding the buyers?
So the buyers, once we get a property in the contract, like Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, honestly, like literally
Craigslist still works?
Craigslist still works.
Got it.
It does. Yeah. Craigslist still works. Facebook Marketplace works a ton. We boost our ads to, place it in front of more eyes. But a lot of the buyers come from there. And here's the thing, like the buyers though are typically owner occupants, like they're end users. The majority of our buyers, maybe like 10% of our buyers are investors. The majority of them are literally end users. And what I've noticed is that a lot of them, they're like basically hardworking people who's been saving up their cash, and they want to buy their home, and they want to buy like a fixer upper because they've just saved enough to buy that fixer upper to move in it while they fix it up. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of...
who your buyer is.
Yeah.
So right now, because you hear typically if you look at manufacturing, in my experience, right, a lot of them are investors. They're trying to get a higher cap rate. So you're saying, and buyers, are you doing creative financing, seller financing, or everyone's getting loans? Like, how is that? How are you doing that?
So everybody's basically, they're just cash buyers. I've owner financed one of them just a couple of months ago for like, I bought it cash and owner financed it out to the, basically like, I bought it for like 14 and she put like 11,500 down, paid the closing costs, but I did it and I sold it to her at $35,000.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So yeah, and then I'm going to be doing more of that. You know what I mean? But but there's the opportunity to even buy them owner finance. It's there too.
Right.
Yeah.
So for the people who are listening, because a lot of people, they don't necessarily pick the type of properties, but I mean, we mostly do single family. Yeah. So what is your average, do you know what your average fee was when you were doing single family?
Single family average fee,
it's been a while ago.
It's been a while.
Okay, well, what's your average fee now in mobile home?
Yeah, average fee is $10,000 now. We want to raise it to $15,000. However, but like, you know, we get so many deals working like $17,000, $20,000, $34,000 was the highest so far. But yeah, like we have so many that's 17 and, you know, 14. Like the fees are really good.
Yeah, because we did a lot of 20s when we were doing them last year. We went really hard on them last year, and I think we found all of them. So because it kind of stopped. Yeah. Okay, so anyone that wants to transition to this, their fees may be higher if they go to mobile homes on land versus single family.
I think so.
Okay, so
yeah, I think so.
So you're in multiple states. I'm curious, how do the fees vary between all the different states?
Well, I don't think it does because, like, you know, like Texas, we're still pulling the 17,000s. Here we did 17, 14, 11, and then we have a couple that we're working on, and those are like 12s. You know what I mean? And I don't think it does really. I think it really boils down to how you negotiate the deal. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah, I don't think it does.
Got it. Okay, so
at least from the ones that I've been doing so far. Now we'll see when I start going out even more.
Where else are you gonna go?
Everywhere there's a mobile home.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you hit the Carolinas, you have Florida, and you got here. I mean, I think those some of the biggest spots.
Yeah, Oregon. There's some more out there.
Up in the Northwest. Got it. All right. Well, so we talked about how your business is different. We kind of talked about your transition, so maybe this isn't really a relevant answer, but like, how did COVID impact your business?
I guess it didn't, in a sense. It's just, you know, it was just at the beginning. We didn't know what was going to happen, but like we stayed pretty busy. Consistently for the most part. You know what I mean? I mean, there was like a couple of months that was like, you know what I mean? But I don't even think that had anything to do with COVID. You know what I mean?
So having, well, I guess looking at the rest of the year, right? Because we're coming up at the end of the year. I mean, what is your numbers going to look like?
By the end of the year, I hope to reach at least 80. We'll be at 73 by tomorrow. So we should be at least 80. You know, my goal was to exceed that, but you know, hey, it is what it is. Yeah. Yeah. But now next year, once we've been able to implement everything that, you know, we're getting from Gary, and, you know, next year we should be able to double that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You think so?
God willing. I mean, we're definitely going to try.
What was your business like in 19?
At 19?
In 2019.
2019. So 2019, we did less than that. We did about 50 something deals, but I also had a baby in 2019.
Got it.
Yeah, so I had I've been popping out babies for the last few years. But yeah,
so 2019 did 60 transactions. You went nationwide, so I'm guessing that most of your transactions are still in Florida then.
It's Got
it.
Yeah. Okay.
And then everything is wholesale?
Yeah, everything is wholesale. Yeah, eventually now we want to add back in, because I used to rehab, right? So, you know, I actually have a love for that, you know, so eventually I want to get back into that. But then I have also learned, like with my personality, I need the focus. I need the focus, because otherwise I'll be chasing way too many rabbits. So
yeah. And what does your company look like today?
So right now we have, Heather, she helps me with everything. Acquisitions, I'm involved in acquisitions as well. I'm actually like involved in too many things, but like, Heather helps me with acquisitions. And now after meeting with Gary, he's wanting us to move her to disposition and bring on somebody else for acquisitions. And then we have 3 lead managers. We have a transaction coordinator that I needed one bad. Actually, we just brought her on because I was doing too much. Yeah, so she has been really helpful so far. And then we have an admin. So it's really small. So we like about 7 people. And then once we bring on like another acquisition, we'll probably be at 8.
How much are you spending a month on direct mail?
A direct mail, $8,500 to $10,000.
Got it.
Yeah.
And then, so Orlando Herrera wants to know, are you using the same contract to wholesale mobile homes that you do on single family homes?
Yes, because so here's the thing. So like their own land, they're all on land, right? The ones that I've been doing. So basically the land is still real property. Now, if the mobile home is retired, then it's considered real property anyways. But yeah, I just use the same contracts, and I might have, different like clauses in there for whatever. Yeah.
Let's see. Guys, if you guys have any questions, please post them in here. One of the guys says that if someone took $800,000 of his money, they'd be missing kneecaps. Okay, so you said you're using Eric Torrente?
Yeah, Eric Torrente. I think it's like Flip This Real Estate List or .com or something like that. But yeah, he's everywhere. But yeah, he can get you like motivated, any motivated list that you need.
Okay. And then using that, you're only doing direct mail. You're not cold calling. You're not texting.
Yeah. So we have done some cold calling. Not much. I had like 3 people doing cold calling. I got rid of all of them. Yeah. So I got rid of all of them. Now we're gonna add that back on, but be a little bit more structured and have eyes on these people more. So I figured, okay, let's just get rid of that, and then we can revisit that later on. But like the majority of my deals are direct mail. I use Listability. I get my my list from Listability, and then when I was needed Keep Tracing, then they actually added that on as a service as well, and also Eric does that too, and he gets me a pretty good result for that. So got it.
And then Sam's here with you. How involved is Sam in the business?
Oh, I fired my husband.
You fired him? Wow, poor guy.
So he has his own company. He has a digital marketing company that helps, I guess, coaches that have like high-end products. So he market their stuff online, Facebook ads, and I'm not the best at pitching his stuff at all. I'm sorry, hubby. But yeah, so but he has his own company, and like so in my business, I'm always bouncing things. Before he started his digital marketing company, he was actually in real estate for like 10 years. Oh. Yeah, so he knows the business. So I can bounce ideas, and then go to him, and whenever I have some crazy idea, and ask him his thoughts. So he's pretty helpful with that, and he's just like a supporter. Oh,
that's good. Well, yeah. Like I said earlier, like everyone needs support. Yeah. Nate Brown wants to know: Have you wholesaled any mobile homes that are located in a park?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
And that sounds like you're going to.
Yes.
Talk about that.
Yeah. I do plan on I definitely plan on doing that. However, again, I have to kind of like keep myself focused. Yeah, because trust me, like this has been the plan for like 6 months now, right? Like literally 6 months. But it's like I have so much going on. I have to stay focused, and then let's get this first, get me out of that before I jump into that. However, that is a major plan. That's like on top of the list.
Got it. How do you plan on wholesaling those?
I don't know. We'll see. I haven't figured that out yet.
Because it's easy to get the sellers.
Yeah, it is. I'm going to figure it out, though. When I do, I will tell you.
All right. Yeah. All right. Yeah, because we get those and we just throw them away.
Yeah.
All right. And then Sam's asking, how many mailers are you sending out, and how many deals under contract do you get per mailing?
So we sent out, all year, this year, we've literally sent out about 220,000 mailers, so, and out of those, let me see, every month, I think the average is about 200, 300 leads or something like that we get. Yeah, that's about the average for that.
Yeah. Got it. And then Orlando wants to know, what are some of the biggest challenges when you compare wholesaling a mobile home to wholesaling a single family?
Some of the biggest challenges from wholesaling mobile homes to single family. Well, I would say, okay, so one of the biggest thing is now when the, especially like when the mobile home is not retired, it has its own separate title, and then the land, is also separate. Now we use a third party company that does the mobile home title search. Yeah, one of the biggest thing with that is the title. When it's a mess, that thing is a mess. Okay. Oh my gosh, it is like literally. So like that is probably the biggest thing. Is just when it's a mess, it's a mess. And then now there comes two. The good thing is if the land is clear and it's just the mobile home part that's the mess, okay, we don't worry, because if the land,
that's the value of the land.
Yeah, because now you can, the title company can still close it. It's just that now the buyer would have to sign some form of a hold harmless that say, hey, look, we're not responsible. You know what you're getting.
Yeah, it's personal property.
It is. And then you know what? And then surprisingly enough, buyers will still buy a messy trailer title or a trailer with a messy title.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it
cash,
one of the biggest. Yeah, definitely cash. Yeah.
Because I can tell you last year we had on the board like 140,000 in a month.
Yeah.
We were like stoked. We were beyond excited. We had some big ones in there. 70, for one of those deals. And then that 140,000, once we ran into this mess, turned into 40,000.
Yeah. I had some of those. Yeah. I had some of those. Was like we're like you counting the eggs before it hatch.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So yeah. That is the big challenge though you'll run across. But like, at the end of the day though, like there's still hope to do the deal. Sometimes you just gotta find a buyer that's just willing to take it on, and because you might have already a buyer for it and they don't want it. That's fine, and in the situation too, sometimes we use that to renegotiate a better deal and say, look, this is messy. Like nobody's gonna buy this at that price. You know what I mean? So and then we just continue working on it and get a different buyer.
So Kevin Saunders wants to know, how are you finding cash buyers mobile homes? Are you doing anything different besides Facebook Marketplace?
No, really. Honestly, that stuff works. Now, here's what I will suggest though, because at the end of the day, sometimes you don't have control over what Facebook does. Right?
Nope,
so
you do not.
So you gotta have a backup plan. You gotta be ready, man. Like, you gotta have other, do have other options, because sometimes, Facebook, they'll shut you down for no reason. So
well, there's a reason, just may not agree with it.
Yeah. No. Yeah. But yeah, so they'll shut you down. So I mean, we have a team of people and we have different accounts in case we need to use them. However, you just don't want to have all your egg in that basket and just counting on that to go well without a hitch. But just in case it does have another plan. Like one of the things we're doing, it's not ready yet, but we're creating our own website platform with the apps, and then we can run ads and bring people to us. You know what I mean? So just that way we're ready for anything.
Yeah. What is your biggest struggle right now?
My biggest struggle right now. Well, one of my biggest struggle right now is like, the stuff that I'm basically had to go, to Gary for is just, I need some organization, because this head right here, that thing can be chaotic sometimes, right? Yeah. So just kind of like getting clarity on everything and just then now implementing, because I'm a creative person, a creative thinker, and I got a lot in my head. And sometimes, like, I tend to complicate stuff more than it has to be, which my husband, he helps with that a lot, because to him, it's like so simple and straight to the point. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm like, it's not that simple. It's like, no, really, it is that simple. But you know what I mean? So like, I will complicate some things that doesn't need to be as complicated. You know what I mean? So that has created some of those struggles. You know what I mean?
Well, a lot of times the biggest bottleneck is us, and that was actually what Gary made very clear. Like, I thought I was not the bottleneck, but I still am. So Kevin wants to know, follow-up question is, how are you comping mobile homes?
Well, so now that's a tricky one sometimes, because sometimes there are no comps. Sometimes there are no comps. However, though, I will look at, what everything's selling for sure. I'll compare it. Land size is big too, especially like in some areas, So I'll compare all of that, all the, apples to apples type scenario. But sometimes we can always do that. So I just basically look at the big picture. I look at the big picture from, in some areas like Louisiana, though, assess value, like that thing, they don't help nothing at all. But some areas I can look at the assess value, get some ideas.
Right,
you know what I mean? Yes. And then if there are comps, I will look at the different comps. I check Zillow, but you know about Zillow. So, but I look at it, I see what's going there, what kind of transaction that's happening, if those are available. And then sometimes, if that's available also, like I will look at, say so there's no company, I'm looking at, okay, what did this person buy it for? Yeah. How long ago? I look at everything. I just look at as much information as possible. Now, when it comes to like offers, now one of the thing is sometimes because I'm selling to end user, really, sometimes because of that my offer can be more, but of course I'm taking into consideration conditions and things like that, but my offer typically can be more. Now if it's an area that has a lot of activity, if there's a lot of sales activity, they let me know, look, people are buying in that area. So and if the seller's basically kind of like a hard ass on that one, I'm like, okay, well, I don't have to beat them down on the price, because at least if I get if I get it at like $20,000 less, I can still make a 10 G's on there, and then the buyers still feel like they're getting a good deal, because their mindset is they're not thinking like an investor, or I have to be at 50% or 60 or 70%. Right. You know what I mean? They're just thinking, oh yeah, I save some money, I get a good deal, and it's, if retail, let's say if the property is going retail for like 70 and they're getting it for like 62, they feel like they're getting a deal, a lot of them. So,
Robbins wants to know, do you think the mobile home industry will be more popular with the affordable home crisis that we're experiencing?
I do, for sure.
Yeah.
I do.
Diane says that she sees that you have children.
Yes.
How do you balance raising young kids and being in real estate?
Ooh, girl. Ooh, that is the $1 million question. It's hard. Okay, so it's hard. And my kids, I got a 5-year-old, a 4-year-old, just turned 4, and then the youngest is so he'll be 18 months at the end of this month, and they're all bossy. They all think they control me, right? So it's really hard. But now, one of the reasons why, like I used to be in Tampa, we moved to South Florida, is to be close to my mom. Free babysitters, all right? So mom's there, she's retired, she can help. And then we have a nanny that helps us out. She's a huge help, because otherwise it's just they don't care. They want their time when they want their time. They don't care you on a call. They're gonna be banging on the door. They don't care. They don't care. So it's not easy. It's not easy. I have a lot of mommy guilt.
How do you deal with the mommy guilt?
Oh my gosh, I don't. Yeah. It's just like, sometimes I do the stuff that you're not supposed to do. Like I try to compensate with a gift or something every now and then. Just you ain't supposed to do that though. You know what I mean? But yeah, it's not the right way to compensate for that. But it's just really hard. But the thing is though, it's like, I am though in the process of making the right move so that I don't have to take as much time away.
Got it. Z wants to know, who is this Gary guy?
Gary is the boss. He's the man.
Yeah. It's Gary Harper with Sharper Pasa. Yeah. So he came in, beat us up pretty good too, but we're going to have a killer 2021 with him here.
Yes, for sure.
I see Pace Moore being here. I saw Pace. You should definitely talk to him. He's I think you could probably increase your cash flow even further.
Oh, really?
Talking to him.
All right.
Let's see what else is here. Can you describe the cash flow from finding the lead to closing now that you are virtual? Oh, workflow, sorry. Can you describe the workflow from the lead to closing now that you're virtual?
Yeah, so basically, so when we send out our mailers, the leads calls, they come in, right? Now, we have actually been having our leads go to a recorded voicemail. Next year, we're going to change it to everybody answers live. Okay. But that's been, coming into recorded voicemail. And then, the people that say, hey, I want to sell, they get called first, right? So once we lock up that property under contract, we get all the information from the sellers. Property is then locked up on the contract. Once property is locked up on the contract, then we send somebody local there to go take pictures. We don't have them just take pictures, though. We have them do videos, inside, outside, everything.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. We have them do videos. We have them take picture and then write basically a short report. Some of them, depending on how lazy they are, you can know which one are lazy or not. Some will try to give you a paragraph. But if they follow an instruction, they're telling us, exterior, like what are you observing? What are you seeing? What's going on? What's going on with everything? Like interior, and then by rooms, kitchen, bath. Like give us details. Tell us what you see. What's going on? What's happening? So aside from the pictures, the videos, we want a detailed report of what's going on. And then if the owner mentioned anything interesting, we should know. You put that in there. You know what I mean? If the tenant mentioned anything interesting, we should know. You put that in there. You notice anything interesting with the neighborhood, you put that in there. Like literally, like they have to follow that format, and then they send us everything. And then they kind of give us a general idea of what we have, in our hands. Then so once we have that information, then we put it up for sale.
Got it. All right. Let's see what else there. People are recognizing that mommy guilt is real.
Yes, it is.
So I don't know how I'm saying this right. Is it Thoyo? But he wants to know if you're getting lists, your data from Eric Torrente, should he not rely on PropStream for mobile homes? Should
we not? You know what? I have PropStream actually, but I haven't actually learned how to use it the right way. So I haven't used it, so I can't really answer that for you, honestly. But like, I just haven't figured it out, the right way. But Eric is pretty good. So, definitely 100%. I recommend him. And,
What's his company name?
I think it's flipthisrealestatelyst.com. If I'm,
it's really long.
Yeah, I think it's flip this. I could be wrong. I think it's that are similar.
Yeah.
But he's on Facebook and Instagram, so he's easy to find.
Bill Ransom wants to know, and I think this is kind of where I was going with this earlier, is have you considered buying them and then owner financing rather than straight wholesaling? Oh
yeah, for sure. So we definitely, I recently did one, but definitely want to start doing more of those. Yeah.
Got it. And then Robbins wants to know, are you planning on buying and holding for legacy for the kids?
Not buying and holding as rental for not individual, because I don't want to deal with that headache. You know what I mean? So I don't want to buy individual mobile home and hold them as rental. Owner financing, I don't mind doing that all day, but I'm not trying to have that mobole home maintenance call all the time. Nope, yeah. I'm not trying to deal with that. But no, but maybe mobile home park eventually, yes. Something on a larger scale. Yeah.
Someone did correct us. It is flipthisrealestatelyst.com.
It is? Okay, thank you.
So Daniel Moore wants to know, how do you deal with trailers that need to be moved but may be too risky?
So I haven't had to do that personally. Now, I have buyers who buy for me. They buy it. Sometimes they figure they want to move the trailer, elsewhere or whatever they do. Like right now, we just been keeping it simple. You buying it as is, and then whatever they do is whatever they do.
Yeah.
So we haven't even got involved in that.
Yeah, I think that's the direction we would go as well.
Yeah.
So Pace wants to know when he come on the show. Pace, we'll have to talk offline about that. And then Monica wants to know, how much you pay for boots on the ground?
So $90 on average. It's been between 80 and 90, but on average it's $90. Now, if we need them to put like a lockbox on there, they go and buy the lockbox. They don't. We don't pay them any extra to put it on. We just reimburse them for whatever it costs. Now, if we need them to like change locks, that cost typically will range from $10 to $40 to change a lock, plus the cost of the extra lock. We'll just purchase. Yeah.
$40 or less to change a lock?
Mm-hmm.
Man.
Yeah.
I can't get that.
Yeah.
I need to talk to our vendors. All right. Cool. So what do you foresee? I mean, we kind of talked about for 2021. Anything else you see big time for 2021?
Honestly, I don't know as far as like, I'm curious to see where this country really is going to go with the COVID situation. Some places shutting down, some are opening. I don't know.
You're in Florida, I'm in Arizona. It's like it doesn't exist.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly. So
I was I was there in Tampa, right, last week, and there's 200 people in the room.
Yeah.
And I think 2 people were wearing a mask. Right.
Yeah.
But I did come back, and I actually was not allowed to be in the rest of the house, so I was actually quarantined to my daughter's room. Until I had passed 2 negative tests. So this morning I got the second negative test. So now I was allowed to hug my babies again.
Oh, good. Yeah. Good.
That was tough. Honestly, it was tough. Yeah. Like when you're on the road and it's business, right? Like you're focused on business. You're not, it's not that you don't miss the kids, but like you're focused, right? But you're at home and you can't like play with the kids. Right. That was tough.
Yeah, were they banging down and knocking down the door?
Oh, no, they knew I was in quarantine.
Okay.
No, little Emily, she's 3. She finally was able to say quarantine correctly by the end of it. What is your superpower?
So, I knew you were going to ask that question, and I was like, okay, what's my superpower? I think a part of it is I'm intuitive in the sense of like I'm able to pick up certain things very well, and like it helps me in my deals, you know what I mean? It helps me, like for example, Heather, like she was talking to one of our sellers, right? And the seller, she was like, she was a bit flustered, you know what I mean? She was a bit flustered, and then when Heather called her, Heather asked her, can she put a lockbox on the property for us? And she was like, how am I gonna pay for that? I ain't got no money for that, right? And then I said, So it just kind of gave me a sense of, because she called me, she gave me the rundown. I was like, okay. So I felt in that moment, like really, like in my spirit, really, I was like, you know what? Call her back. I said, I bet she needs some money. I said, call her back, find out what's going on with her. And then I'm like, something told me in my spirit that I think this lady needs some help. And if she does, we'll send her some help. So Heather called her back. When she called her back, you know where she was at? She was literally on the line, like one of those like shelter line, waiting for food with her kids. I was like, well, Heather was like, how the hell did you know that? I was like, I don't know. My spirit just like told me something was off about just that conversation. And I wasn't even the one talking to her, right? I wasn't the one talking to her. It was Heather. She's like, tell me, it was just something just happened. That was like, something is not right. And then, so we sent her $750. I was like, just go get some food for your kids.
Yeah,
you know what
intuition.
I mean? Yeah, so I have that thing about me that just picks up on things. And then I guess one of the things is like, any scenario, right? Any scenario, I'm able to dissect it in a way where it's like, okay, so I can say, okay, you give me a scenario, and I said, okay, this is a possibility of what could happen. Like I give you all the different scenarios. All right, now this is how you can react to this one or respond to that one, respond to this one. Now choose one. You know what I'm saying? But what's this is, you're going to get one of those results, one of those answers.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. Yeah. Given our conversations, stick-to-itiveness, right? You're going to solve the problem. Yeah. That's definitely your superpower. Yeah. All right, so we're going to wrap this up. I want you to think about just something you want to leave the listeners with while I make just a couple of really quick announcements. Guys, if you guys enjoyed today's show, please like, subscribe, share, comment, tag some friends. It helps us grow our reach. The more you guys tell YouTube and Facebook that you like this, the more other people will see it. We've got no show next week, so we're taking the rest of the year off. We'll probably be doing something. We got our new studio. It's all wrapped up, so we're probably going to do something fun with it. But right now, there's nothing scheduled for the rest of the year. For you, someone wants to get a hold of you. How do they get a hold of you? Yeah, so I am, for Instagram is at I am Sandy Cesaire, right? And then also too, mobilehomesflip.com. You can find me on there. We're going to be coming out with the course, as I mentioned earlier. And then, of course, I'm on Facebook. You just Google my name. I'm on Facebook. And also, to my website my personal website is IamSandyCesaire.com. There it is. Yeah. What message do you want to leave the listeners with? I think one of the biggest thing is, for the year that we've had, life is unpredictable, right? Life is unpredictable. So this year, that's more accurate this year than any other year. Man, tell me about it. Like, you just, never know. And, some of us did okay, but, this thing disrupted a lot of lives. You know what I mean? Leaving a lot of people just, like struggling or losing family members or just, just a lot of changes. So, I think that
that going into 2021, whatever situation that you've been in, like especially if it's not just been a good year for you, you just kind of have to remember to just, get yourself back together, let go of anything that's not working for you. If it's anger, if it's like, how is that working out for you? Is it making things better? It's not, then let it go. Some of y'all gotta let go of people. Some people that might be the bad apple in your life. Let it go. Like, you're getting a new year, you want to start fresh. So whatever the situation is that ain't helping you, that's not working out for you, let it go, and then start the new year fresh. You know what I mean? Get your mind back, get yourself back together. This too shall pass. You know what I mean? There's tomorrow. So you want to start with a good spirit, because tomorrow is not promised. Tomorrow is not promised. You know what I mean? If you want things to change, nobody ain't gonna change that for you. So you need to make sure that change happen for yourself. It's like somebody said, you need to be an agent of change, not a victim of change. Yeah. So basically, the change that has to happen for you and in your life, whether that be people, your environment, your own mind, change that thing, man, and go into 2021 with a fresh start.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with firing people from your life.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So perfect. I love it. All right. Thank you.
This
was a lot of fun.
Yes.
Thank you guys for watching.
Yes. Oh, and now got my Haitian flag going on here.
Yeah, see, we real estate disruptors. Can't nobody touch us. And yeah, we about to give you game. Shout out to Steve Train. Real estate disruptors. They cannot touch us. And yeah, we about to give you game. Shout out to Steve Train. Jump on the Steve Train. We about to give you game. REI's flowing through my veins. And you don't have to look no further. See right here, you gon' learn everything. Yeah, see, we real estate disruptors.